Can everybody hear me? Is good? Okay. So my name is Vikas Khanna. It's easy once you say it a few hundred times. I'm from Covad, and I'm here to talk to you about wireless. I spoke last year at Nanog in Brooklyn, and that was kind of a precursor to some of the WiMAX stuff that we were working on. So now I'm going to kind of showcase some of the new technology, new products that we got in, and how it's working in comparison. So before I start, how many of you actually work with any form of microwave wireless equipment today? 1, 2,
I'm crazy.
3. Come on, join the bandwagon. 4. Microwaves in the kitchens do not count. All right, 4. Okay, wow. So we're still at equal growth from last year. So quickly talk about why the fixed wireless business, why it's still around, the technology, some of the lessons that we've learned with WiMAX, and what we can potentially expect to see going forward. So, at the end of the day, I think everybody will agree it's all about the dollars, right? So if you look at some of the data here, and this is 2007, I didn't want to spend the $2,000 to get the 2008 report, but the equipment manufacturers, I mean, they're going into the multi-billions now in terms of sales to their customers. And at the end of 2007, there were over 1.6 million broadband wireless subscribers itself. I think today the number is sitting at close to 3 or 4 million, and that's a good blend of a good blend between domestic and foreign services. Asia Pac still represents a majority of the growth, and a lot of that has to do with the infrastructure challenges that they deal with here. But there are some things that we're doing in the U.S., which I'll talk about in a couple of seconds here, that will potentially drive more wireless development here. And primarily the service delivery method is Ethernet, which in itself is projected to be a $40 billion market within the next 5 years. So what does that mean? Right, money. So as long as they keep making money, we're going to keep doing this. And I'll give you some perspective. In our organization, if you look at DSL and T1s, the average ARPU, which is the average recurring revenue per user, on a T1 line typically sits at about $150 to $200. The ARPU in the wireless world for us is about $420. So a significant amount of money to be made there. So what you find here in the news, Proxim had this announcement where they're actually lighting up a community in Missouri with wireless as opposed to wireline infrastructure. So they're providing all the same services but saving about $4,000 a month. And then here we have in Spain, Iberbanda, they selected Alvarian to expand their 3.5 gig WiMAX network in Catalonia. And you're going to see more and more of this. In fact, I think Huawei just won a recent announcement of 41 new deployments in Philippines, Saudi Arabia, Morocco, and in Pakistan. So it's just going to grow. Now, what are we going to find that's going to drive the U.S. growth? It's right here, right? The Broadband Stimulus Act. So my suspicion is that if you look at wireless and how long it actually takes to deploy services, days, not weeks, not months, that you're going to find a lot of these stimulus dollars actually go to rural, underserved, or unserved communities and light up facilities there. So this is just the beginning. And I think what you're also going to find is today, what I talked about specifically is fixed wireless, but there's also mobile wireless, which we're also going to be exploring more of. So from a technology perspective, right, again, it's fixed wireless, it's microwave technology, it's not Wi-Fi, it's not UMTS, not HSPDA, it's actual microwave technology. And then the backbone network equipment is still the same, but what we're finding today is some of the newer backhaul equipment is actually MEF certified. And as a result of that, we're seeing some better performance, better features that did not exist just a few years ago. So technology, TDM, then switched to Ethernet, now it's combined. Frequency 6 to 38 gigs, pretty standard. Point-to-point, although some vendors do support some multi-point frequencies. Finally, really have enforcement for QoS and ultra-low latency guidelines that we need across wireless. And this is kind of funny considering the audience I'm speaking to, but high capacity. And when we talk about high capacity, we talk about a gig. A gig. Okay, just want to make sure everybody's listening. So in the pre-WiMAX world, right, you bought this equipment, you put it up on a roof, you aimed it line of sight, and then now you have internet access and you have 4 megs, 5 megs, whatever it is. No interoperability. You had to stick with one vendor. If that vendor didn't work out, too bad for you. If they filed bankruptcy, too bad for you. You're going to have to gut your equipment, start all over again. Very challenging. Frequencies, limited frequencies there, again, unlicensed, so anybody can hijack your frequencies. Coverage, typically up to 8 miles. Capacity limited, again, because the equipment can only manage so much. A lot of it has to do with the RF utilization across the link. And, line of sight is typically required. And now, actually, it's not reaching end of life. They pretty much are in place. And what you find now is with the WiMAX gear, finally, you have some interoperability. So if I choose a vendor that isn't working out, for whatever reason, whether it be financial or technical, I can actually go to a different vendor and find ways to make the gear work together. We have now a new frequency that we're operating in. The 5 gig bands are definitely very saturated. Now we have 365, although within the 365 range, we have to potentially talk about interference with radar. Coverage is still about 8 miles, but now we have wider coverage as opposed to narrow coverage. Capacity went from 10 megs to potentially 45 megabits, so huge jumps for us. Non-line of sight support, this is a big problem depending where you are located, especially in metro areas. You may not have direct line of sight, but you can do some NLS and you can still get the service. Overall spectral efficiency, so where your channel bandwidth across the link is actually less, but you're getting more throughput. And support for VLANs, QoS and COS, protocols, and just overall improved processors. Again, to give you some perspective, if you look at some of the pre-WiMAX gear, the subscriber units typically have an equivalent CPU of a Cisco 2600. So when you would have denial of service attacks or other large or other smaller packets come through at a high rate, it would just kill the service. And then what would happen is not only would it kill the subscriber unit, that would ripple up across the wireless link and kill the access point, which would then ripple down and kill everybody else. So definitely a problem there. So with the technology, this is just some sample photos, and what you're going to find is it still looks the same. So from wind loading, all this other kind of stuff, that has not changed, but it's just the technology within itself has. So let's talk about some of the challenges, some old, some new. Okay. So this is kind of one of my favorite slides because people don't really have a full grasp of what it can take to install wireless gear. And as I point out here, some of your tools, which include cranes and helicopters, because that actually does happen. So while the technology and features have greatly improved, the physical properties of the links actually haven't. And therefore, we're still doing a lot of the same things as we were before. So on the deployment side, the equipment installations have become easier due to advances in the mounting apparatus, but you still have to deal with a lot of the existing infrastructure, your mounts, your poles, everything like that to make everything work. So it's still a challenge. So within spectrum management, this is the biggest thing. There officially isn't any change in the process, right? You still have to work with the FCC to light up microwave paths where you actually have to file an application and say, I'm going to light up between A and B. Can I do it? What frequencies can I use? And this goes on. And the application could take up to 90 days. You can expedite it. It doesn't really do anything, although you just pay some more money. The FCC rules govern your network build-out. You can't just throw up a link, right? Not yet anyway, unless you have your own spectrum, which is an expensive proposition. You still require true engineering. So while the gear potentially is getting more standardized and easier to use, there's an RF component that really requires some serious engineering there with different tools and just mathematics in general. And the FCC still doesn't guarantee any interference-free communication. It's open air. So within the unlicensed spectrum, again, still first come, first serve, and it's never changing environment. So today your link works, tomorrow it doesn't because Joe Schmo decided to light up a link because he wanted to sell services, and now all of a sudden you're stuck. But now we also have a new option in terms of some bandwidth. Before it was primarily 5.8, now you have 5.47 to 5.25. So you have some new opportunities there, but then you have to use DFS to coexist with radar. That's a big challenge. So it's still a jungle out there. This is a photo that I like to use that represents what it actually looks like. This is in downtown San Jose, California. And so, you have this first come, first serve, and you have to find a way to coexist because that's what the rules say. And so the advantages that you have with the new equipment is that you have a lot more flexibility in terms of the spectrum and the options that you use. The downside is if you install your new equipment, then somebody comes and installs some older equipment, right? You're the one who's going to have to change because they may not have change options available to them. So this is still a challenge that we're dealing with until everybody really comes on board with some of the new gear. From a provisioning and a management standpoint, the old gear it's very archaic. I kind of attribute it to the earlier days of just general routers and switches when they come out. You log in, you do all your work, and you're done. And today what we're finding is, with the new WiMAX, we're finally starting to see an EMS. Right? Something like this is really unheard of. You could go out to market, buy an OpenView, buy different things like that, but now we're actually seeing EMSs actually come through directly from the vendor. Now, there are more steps required for the initial setup, and you also require some expertise in the WiMAX standard, because as part of the setup, you actually have to create profiles that say this link will operate in this frequency using this size channel bandwidth to deliver this throughput across the link. So there's a lot of engineering that goes up front, but once the profiles have been created, you pretty much can replicate and get through very quickly. No more telnet access, all managed through the web or the EMS. And now the field technicians, they need some new time to understand the new tools and the new technology, because what worked before doesn't necessarily work the same. So while RF characteristics are very similar, the deployment actually changes quite a bit. You have multiple channel sizes in WiMAX, right, to offer options in congested RF environments. The RF environment space is, as long as it's free, it will continue to get used by many people. But what we're finding here is now you could do more with less. So the channel bandwidth sizes don't have to be as much for you to attain the same throughput as you may have had to do in the past. You have improved link budgets and adaptive modulation to basically handle tolerance, same with OFDM. So this just makes the link and the path much more resilient. You have new radar detection algorithms to operate in the VFS bands, because what happens is a radar link comes online, or if you're in a similar path, your radio needs to be adjusted because you obviously can't change that radar. And GPS synchronization across the network that lowers the self-induced interference which existed in the past. WiMAX APs and CPs are designed now for rapid outdoor installation. Again, a lot of this information on this particular slide has to do with achieving economies of scale and scope. Before, it was a very get one in, somebody sits down, they provision it, and they hand it off to somebody else who goes on site and actually installs it. Now what we can do is get all this stuff actually deployed in the field, go over the air, provision the gear, have those people get out of there, and we're done. So it's improved quite a bit. What's next? So, some traditional WiMAX applications, you have your wireless internet access, which we've already talked about here. Personal broadband, service can be delivered to a device and not a location. So for those of you with your Palm Pres, your iPhones, things like that, it's just a start and the foundation. Backhaul, traffic up to 50 megabits. I recently had somebody contacted me from Virginia, and they wanted to light up their little neighborhood because the options available for them there weren't that good. So we started talking about using this new gear, and now with WiMAX stuff, you can get 50 megabits. So it's no longer the requirement of getting, a smaller 82.11, B or G type radio and getting some pseudo throughput. Now you're actually going to really get native 50 megabits bandwidth. And then voice and video over WiMAX. Because now you have end-to-end control mechanisms which actually ensure good service delivery. So what's next? So you all have probably heard about fixed mobile convergence, right? I think it was Deutsche Telekom or T-Mobile that had the cellular and then come inside the house or whatever it is, and we'll switch over to the Wi-Fi network. And then, if you look at some of the new products that are actually coming to market, you have your Samsung, your the mobile internet device. Really cool device if you've not seen it. Actually works with WiMAX and Wi-Fi technologies as well. And then you have your fixed WiMAX CPEs with the integrated, Wi-Fi access point. So once it actually, uses Wi-Fi inside, hops onto the WiMAX portion, then it uses WiMAX technology, micro technology to actually backhaul it further. And then the big thing, you have LTE and then you have WiMAX. And a lot of it depends, again, on who you are. So if you look at Verizon, they actually are choosing their LTE vendors. And what we find with long-term evolution is that it is what it is, in the sense that it is just an extension of what is already deployed today in many carriers' footprints. But for a greenfield deployment, you could look at WiMAX. And so here's a story in Network World recently where WiMAX changes the lives in rural Thailand. So when you go to greenfield deployments, depending on the economics, the scope, and the scale of what you're looking at doing, it may serve to be a better proposition. But there really isn't a clear winner. It's just a matter of time before the industry chooses which one it's going to be. And up until that time, we just have the option of both. And that's it. Any questions? Not everybody at once. I know this is an exciting topic, wireless. I'm like the only guy here doing it. Don't be obligated, it's okay.
Anton Capella, Voxel.net. Two questions. One, V6 strategy on WiMAX. I don't think it's a problem to do it, but what's the movement, if there is any? And the second question is, I know Covad's got a lot of product tiers that are specifically designed for resellers and such. Is there a similar plan, or if there is, what kind of shape does that take insofar as can a provider say, give me a UGS like this, RTPS like that, on my reseller tier, quote unquote, within this kind of a platform? Is there anything on the horizon there?
Nothing there yet.
Okay.
For Covad. But to go back to the IPv6 portion, so from a vendor-specific standpoint, there really isn't any major support. Could you make IPv6 work? Yeah, you can, but there's nothing official yet. I think what they're finding is that they're gaining some traction, but there's no catalyst that's really forcing people to go V6 support there.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.